let's talk about some techniques, right? As I mentioned, the gray man theory. Don't stand out. Criminals get caught because they got flashy cars. They've got, all the clothing and whatnot. It's like, well, wait a minute. How did you get all this? Right? Don't stand out, right? Blend in with the clothing and areas. The old phrase, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. If you stand out in an area, you're easy to detect. And although it might sound like John said with the, James Bond wears a tuxedo everywhere and says, hi, I'm James Bond. And then you got all the other folks that run around LARPing, being tactical with all their gear. I don't know how far back I can go in this, but I am wearing my dad core. I am wearing gray shorts and Hoka sneakers, and I look like a 40-year-old dad doing dad stuff. And that's what I want people.
That's his Clark Kent.
It's true.
Yeah. But I like the tactical comment, because we get so many people in this industry, whenever they're traveling, they got all the stickers. It's like, I read your mom's email. They've got the Utilikilt. They've got the tactical backpack and the tactical backpack on their backpack, which is a little backpack that attaches to a tactical fanny pack. And yeah, it looks cool, but if you're doing an on-site physical security assessment, you're not going to get very far. Like, it's not an effective look. So also, if you dress like that, anything goes wrong with computers, you tend to be the first person they talk to from experience.
Right. The two things that I would pull out here is, like I said, flashy criminals are caught criminals. And you notice the MCU disguise. And that's a joke meme, right? That every time the folks in the MCU, they put on the Ray-Bans, they've got a hat on. That's actually not a bad thing. Like, they make fun of it, but that's the idea. It's a plain jacket, a plain hat, set of sunglasses, head down, face forward, right? I have a red Dodge minivan, Caravan.
He does. I can confirm.
It's true. John's been in it.
It sounds
I will
bad.
tell you, I know, right? I will tell you right now, you could commit atrocities in that car and not get pulled over, because any cop is not looking for a red minivan cruising down the road, even at a high rate of speed, because they're like, yeah, kids are probably driving that guy nuts. You get in the Bugatti or whatnot, and now you're a target for many reasons, whether it's just curiosity or like, what are they doing driving a Bugatti? So think about, how do you look to people who might be observing you? Do you look like someone that they need to take more interest in? I almost put this slide in, then I want to move off of this, but I almost put this slide in. There's a great scene in Ocean's 11 where Randy, Brad Pitt's character, is trying to train Matt Damon's character on social engineering. And he goes, they got to like you and then forget you the moment you leave. And whatever you do, don't. And they go, Rusty. And his name's Rusty. He goes, Rusty. And they calls him and he goes away. He's like, do what? Do what? The idea being, though, do not make an impression. You just want to move seamlessly through, and they like you and forget you.
Yep.
All right. So let's talk about what's tracking you. And then John's going to take over here for a second and talk about some credit card stuff. But what's tracking you? Short answer, everything. Everything. Credit cards are tracking you, including purchases, right? That data is harvested for marketers, line level data, and you agreed to it in your end user license agreement. We'll talk about that a bit more. Purchase and loyalty cards. You're not getting a discount because they love you. You're getting a discount because you're giving them data when you buy, what you buy. There's no shortage of stories about Target when the father of a daughter found out that she was pregnant before she was willing to talk about it, because their marketing algorithm detected certain purchasing habits and started sending discount coupons to their house, right? Phones. I mean, I don't think I need to go into that. These phones are nothing but sensors, GPS, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, all that. Your watch, same thing. If you've got a smartwatch, cookies, browsers, laptops, biometrics. My favorite, ePass and tolls. If you've got one of those little ePasses on there, it's not just tracking you on toll roads, folks. One of the things you agreed to is in most major metropolitan areas, they have those antennas to track for traffic, to see when, and they can do a sample. They can say, well, we have this many ePass drivers, so this road is this busy right now, right? Fitness trackers, air tags, and of course, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. You're leaving a signature everywhere you attach to a Wi-Fi point, whether it be just Discovery or a Bluetooth point as well. So, John, why don't you tell us a bit about credit cards, how we use credit cards and cash and that kind of stuff?
One of the big things that we used to say a lot, if you want to be a private individual, is to purchase things in cash. And that is getting harder and harder to do. Kind of an example, when I was down on the border in Arizona, I was in a little town on a river right next to the border, and they didn't accept credit cards anywhere. They had, absolutely no credit cards, no credit cards. And if you talk to the people down there, they were like, I don't want the government tracking me. Okay, we're going to come around to cell phones and all the other ways that they track you here in just a little bit. But it was all ATMs, which kind of cracks me up because like, we don't want people to track us. Here, go use this ATM. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but it doesn't have to, right? Then I was up in Big Sky. My kids had some skiing stuff that they were doing. And it was the exact opposite. Every single store said absolutely no cash, credit card purchases only, or card purchases only. And they had these ready stations, right? Convert cash to a card where you could put in $100 and then it would convert it into a prepaid, like gift card type card. And of course, they would take a percentage of it. One of the things that's interesting about this, right, is that dichotomy of, a place where they're trying to hide from the government. And then you got another place where it's all about ease and trying to make life easier so you can go through and purchase things as quickly as you possibly can. And I'm using this for a couple of reasons. One, to kind of show you that there's differences, and you're seeing more and more where cash is being accepted less and less all the time. But also you have these ready stations where you can convert cash to a card. So if you need to have a credit card, and I strongly encourage you just to have a credit card like this, as Ian was talking about, if you're running from a domestic abuse situation, these are great ways where you can have a non-trackable credit card that can get you access to travel, that can get you access to get out, get you access to a rental car, and it makes it a lot easier. Now, there's other ways that you can still be tracked, but this is one of those ways that makes it a little bit better. Also, for just general life stuff, privacy.com has some really cool stuff that I hope to see rolled out in a number of other credit cards here shortly. You can have a credit card that is exclusive to just one vendor. So if I'm buying things on Amazon, I can have a credit card that's tied or generate a number that's tied to just Amazon.com. If I'm going to a website that is really super shady, like I was talking about climbing stuff in pre-show banter, I bought a bunch of climbing gear from Bulgaria. I'm a little bit uncomfortable doing a credit card purchase with something in Bulgaria. I can generate a credit card number that will only be used for that specific purchase, and then it will shut it down. So this is kind of getting into that privacy and trying to keep these things set up. So whenever you're looking at trying to set up your profile as a criminal, one of those things that you need to have is how do you actually purchase something and still function in society and leave a smaller digital footprint when you actually do it. All right, Ian, back to you.
Yeah, no, I love these points. And what I was grabbing out of the side here, and I'm going to cover some of the numbers. Not that I have any money on here, but I personally like these American Express Bluebird.
Mm-hmm.
I also like Vanilla. Vanilla's pretty good for that kind of stuff. And the reason these two I like a lot is if you need a card like that over a certain amount, they have to set up an account. There's banking rules around saying over X amount you can't load this on there. But you can walk into a Walmart or a lot of places and get one of these kits for Bluebird. Like I said, there's no money on it. Go crazy. Yep. You can get one of these kits for Bluebird and you can preload them there. And there's a maximum that you can put on there. And I think it used to be $100. It might be higher now, but that is immediately available on the card without sharing any registration. And plus, the one reasons I like the American Express ones is for those who don't realize this, American Express is a closed network, which means oftentimes gift cards, like Visa gift cards, the BIN number, the first four numbers for the bank code, they're often banned. They just get, because there's such a high rate of fraud. But with the American Express cards, because they're a closed network, they're often much more accepted. So I don't generally have to worry about that as much. So just a little pro tip, you can go in and hand cash to the folks at Walmart. And as long as your transaction for like Lyft or whatever is under $100, or you want to buy a bunch of those, you can. Metadata. We really need to talk about this because data science and correlation has absolutely changed the landscape of how criminals stay private and how investigations are done, right? We generate a mountain of additional data with everything we do. Every website we go to, every toll we go through with those e-passes, sensor data from our phones. Apple has many patents around when you go into an Apple store. They can tell what parts of the store you spent more time in looking at an item. And there's additional patents that sales places are looking at. Well, if we have an RFID on there, if we see somebody take a box down and put it back, why did they do that? Right? That is generating additional data. John, go ahead.
Yeah, and even within your wallet, I have a Secured wallet that's metal. A lot of your credit cards have RFID in them, and they actually put sensors within the store, and you're not actually transmitting like you're going to buy something, but they can read that RFID data from a number of the different things that you carry around. And then they can also track, like Ian said, where you're at in the store, and then they can redesign the stores where they can put the things that people are going for towards the end of the stores to kind of change that pattern of your shopping as well. So there's some really, really scary stuff out there about shopper metrics.
Right. And all of that feeds into these tools. And if you've never heard of Adobe Campaign Manager or LiveRamp, I highly recommend you go look at them. These are huge data brokers of metadata. And what they do is they try and not necessarily de-anonymize you, because all the end user license agreements that you signed saying, yeah, give me this credit card, and yeah, you can totally share that I like the Chicago Cubs because I buy tickets to go twice a year, or whatever your thing may be, right? They gather that data and they create an anonymous ID around you. And the more of that they get, the more of it they put together. And what ends up happening is over time, as that data gets correlated, they get very, very close to being like, yeah, it's anonymized, but there's nobody else on the planet that this could be. And when you have all that tracking telemetry data of where you were in the store, what tolls you went through, and you can start to link that to an anonymous identity, you get an entire digital footprint of where and what that person does. John?
So yeah, and generally in law enforcement and also in DoD, we call this pattern of life. And a lot of people, they can change their technology that they're using, but their pattern of life is consistent. And I'm going to talk more about this a little bit later with friends and family. But whenever we've tried to track criminals in the past, they may get a burner cell phone, and we can track that burner cell phone happens to go to the house of their sister or their brother or their cousin or something like that. And you can still track all of that stuff. So we'll talk more about that, but this is your pattern of life. And it's almost impossible to break and like develop a new identity if you continue to go through the exact same pattern of life you've always gone through.
Right. Yeah. We're going to talk about that a little bit when we get to activating devices. If you say, oh, I got a burner phone, and you activate it in the same house that you've got your regular phone, well, guess what? All they got to do is look at what phones were connected to towers at the same time as your phone was connected. And now they've got a very short list of phones to be like, this is probably associated. And you start associating those points where we saw their personal phone and this burner phone show up in the same places over and over again. That's their burner phone, right? So I want to leave this slide with this, right? 87% of Americans can be uniquely identified by their zip code, their year of birth, and gender. And don't believe me, believe Carnegie Mellon, because if you go to that dataprivacylab.org, there's the PDF on the paper. And essentially what it says is this metadata, the data that shouldn't mean anything, the year you were born, just the year, your gender, and realizing that there's all kinds of discussions on gender. We won't get into that. What I will say is this paper just discusses what is recognized in government documents like census data, things like that. So your gender is recognized there, and year of birth and zip. 87% of the time, they can uniquely identify you as you.
Yep. So, and I'm gonna show a website that can do this and how quickly this works. I've got it in the slides a little bit later.
Sweet. So let's move past that. How did they get all this data? Guess what? You approved it. You were the product. They want that data to be able to sell to marketers. They want that data. Law enforcement wants that data, that pattern of life that John's talking about, that is incredibly valuable to them. And you signed that data away. The picture that you see on the screen is an art installation project with the terms and end user license agreements for things like Facebook, Instagram, et cetera. And written very tiny at the bottom of those colorful lines, written very tiny, is how long it takes the average person to read this document, not even comprehend it. because you probably need a legal degree to do that, just to read it, right? And it's often many hours, like 2 hours, 4 hours, however long it is, right? In those terms are things like we can share anonymized data. We can gather data about what you looked at, what you liked, how long you were there, any sort of tracking that they can sell and monetize, because Instagram servers don't pay for themselves. That's how they do it. That's how they make that money. So every EULA contains this. Things like the CCPA, the California Consumer Protection Act, the GDPR, the General Data Privacy Regulation, they're trying to give you the tools and abilities to claw some of that data back. But for the most part, this is going to be completely manual. You have to go and request, remove my data, do not sell my data, do not do these things. Because as soon as that data is in those systems, like LiveRamp, like Adobe Campaign, it's easier to buy the data than get a warrant. And even nation states, if that is who you are trying to hide from, you go, oh, well, they can't search my stuff. They can't do that. They don't need to. They can go buy that data and use it to figure out where you've been, who you've associated with, and that is all perfectly legal, John.
And I was going to throw in the United States, I think, is a little bit behind the curve on this one. Everyone's worried about what is the government collecting? What is the government collecting? And as Ian said, it's easier for them just to go buy the data. And I'll talk more about ad IDs a little bit later. But there are other countries around the world that are completely on this train, and they have an amazing surveillance system. And I talked about Huxley and Brave New World versus 1984, where you have an oppressive Big Brother society. Turns out we handed over all this information. We signed all these EULAs, and we made it readily available and legally available to as many people who can afford it as possible. So it becomes really, really terrifying, especially whenever I show you how much your personal data actually does cost, which once again, we'll do here in just a little bit.
You're going to be so sad if you don't know. All right. So, John, why don't you get into that? That's the next slide here. Let's talk about ad tracking.
My biggest thing that's bothering me right now is ad tracking and ad IDs. So whenever you're surfing or you're doing things like if you're on your phone or you're on your computer or you're on your iPad or whatever, a unique ad ID is generated. And this is something that Google and Apple got together and they basically built the standard. I want to say it was in 2013, trying to get away from standard cookie-based tracking and coming up with ad IDs. Now, this seems like a more efficient system. So if you think about a cookie is something that a website gives you. When you go back to that website, the website knows where you're at. It's your session tracker. And that's a beautiful thing. Otherwise, the web flat out doesn't work. But whenever you're talking about advertising networks, you get into this problem where are we going to try to put something that's tracking absolutely everyone and every single website everywhere? Yes, that is exactly what people did because they wanted to monetize the advertising revenue on their websites. We have these huge monopolies in Google and in Facebook and in Amazon, and Microsoft is little in there. Microsoft too, they do it as well, and Apple. And all of these different websites, because they want to monetize, they put the software on their website that'll actually collect those tracking IDs or those ad tracking IDs. And then those ad tracking IDs are constantly shared back to the mothership. They're shared back to Google, they're shared back to Apple, they're shared back to Microsoft, and Amazon is another one. And then they're collecting all of that aggregate data. Now, what exactly does that mean that they are tracking? Well, the rules state that if you're going to use that ad ID, only the ad ID should be tracked and saved. And it's the only thing that should be sent is that ad ID. Spoiler alert, it's totally not. And this gets into a problem because if you look at Android, you can go through and you can clear out your ad tracking ID and you can generate a new one. You can do it in Apple. It's a little bit more difficult. Microsoft, it's built in. Just basically Google a search how to reset your ad ID or delete your ad ID or opt out. Now, at that point, you think you're actually safe. And a lot of these devices, they'll pop up and say, this is going to degrade your overall experience on the web. We won't be able to highly target ads to you whenever you do this. And that's a true statement. It will change the way that advertisements are sent to your browser. But a lot of the people that utilize and buy this ad tracking ID data, they're not actually tracking it correctly, or more accurately, they're doing very malicious, dirty, filthy, rotten stuff. And they're tracking more than just the ad ID itself. So go to the next slide. I think it's the one that I talk about that. All right. So this was an amazing article that was done by Serge Engelman. And they talked about how many of the top advertising, not apps, but sorry, the top apps that are on like Google Play and in the Apple Store, how they're actually handling these ad IDs and whether or not they're actually handling the ad IDs properly. You see, a lot of apps that you use utilize ad IDs as well because they serve you up ads in the middle of your gaming experience or your app usage experience as well. Now, the problem is many of these apps are tracking far more than your ad ID. They're also tracking your IAMI number. That is your number that is your kind of like your MAC address for the cell network. It's a unique identifier for your cell device whenever it joins a cell network. So as Ian mentioned, talking about pattern of life, you can go through and completely clear out your ad ID. You can completely reset your ad ID, but that ad ID and that IAMI number are paired with each other and they can repair you very, very, very quickly back to who you are. My point is, if you're just going to try to get rid of ad IDs, that's not enough to completely clean out your pattern of life. Because a lot of the algorithms and artificial intelligence algorithms that exist in these ad tracking like monsters, they are not just looking at your IMEI number or your ad ID, they're looking at the websites that you go to. And websites that you go to, when you go through them, is as unique a fingerprint for you as an individual as your ad ID. So if you're constantly trying to change things, you're going to run into a wall very, very, very quickly that they're going to reassociate a new ad ID or a tracking identifier with you, even if you're trying to hide from it. So one of the examples that I talk about quite a bit, if you work with law enforcement or you work with, let's say, the military, there are certain websites that they go to, whether you're law enforcement or military, that light you up like a Christmas tree. That'll say exactly who you are and what you're doing for a career. And this is also true for InfoSec professionals. We tend to go to a lot of the exact same websites. We tend to see these profiles that show up again and again and again, and they can be targeted to the point where certain nation states, specifically Israel, as I've talked about many times with the NSO group, they have the ability to utilize ad tracking networks to deploy zero-click malvertisements to highly targeted individuals at specific locations, because that's where this is being used by a nation state. So it's got these heavy security implications built into it as well. So the other thing, and I'll talk about Cory Doctorow here a little bit later, is this is all evolving and this is all changing so fast that governments cannot keep up. John Oliver did an amazing segment on ad IDs and ad tracking, and you have to go see it. It's a two-parter, 2 1/2-hour sections. And he just did an amazing job of kind of articulating just how big of a problem this actually is and how little people in the United States Congress and Senate actually understand it as well. So this is a great article. Go read it. It's terrifying. Basically, they're breaking rules. Google doesn't care about the rules. Apple doesn't care about the rules. Microsoft doesn't care about the rules. And I guarantee you, your elected officials, they sure don't care about the rules either. All right, Ian, back to you.
Sure. Michelle had a comment. Michelle Khan. I was going to say, who was it? Michelle Khan. No, I'm sorry, Jonathan Simpson. It was the next one down. So Cyberpunk is already here. And if you look in the Discord, I just dropped a meme. It's Pirates of the Caribbean, but nice. You best start believing in cyberpunk dystopias. You're in one.
We're in it. We're in the cyberpunk dystopia.
Right.
So let's talk about your privacy. People were talking about security and privacy, Ian. This is one of the tools that we use at Black Hills Information Security for highly targeted red teams. Okay. So a general penetration test, somebody's going to spearfish and be like, your UPS package is scheduled to be delivered today. Track it here. And a lot of companies don't want to go beyond that. Well, I kind of wanted to cover how far someone could actually go beyond that. And you can do a search. And Ian was talking about, you can actually identify people. I would put just a little bit more with that Carnegie Mellon. You do need like a first name or a last name, and you can highly target someone. So inside of this search parameter, you can put in just a last name and a first name, and it'll automatically do a search and pull everyone with that last name and that first name. You can put in an address. It doesn't have to be a current address. You can put any address that that particular individual has lived at. You can put in a zip code. Usually I can find people with a first name, last name, rough age range. And then with the age range over here in the right-hand corner and a zip code, and I can find a very targeted individual. If you have someone's social security number, you usually get them dead to rights. And I'll talk about that here in a couple of moments. But this is what you would put in as far as a search parameter. You can put in range, you can put in last name, first name, middle name. Middle name does actually help quite a bit with some of these things. Or if you believe that you have just an email address, you can put that in here and it'll try to correlate that email address with all of the users who have been known to use that email address. How do they get that information? All it takes is someone using an email address to register for a website that does shipping. And then they're selling that shipping data, or the shipper is selling that data to these data brokers. And now they have that correlation tied up. So I've seen situations where people harass other people from an email. We've put that inside of this, and we've been able to find the person in under 5 minutes who's using that email address because they made a mistake of using that email address to buy something online. So once again, if we're trying to live like criminals, honestly, you don't want to be using your own private email address for doing crimes, because that can very quickly tie back to you as an individual as well. So everything I'm about to show you cost me $5. I think it was $5. It may have been a little bit more, but it's a lot less than what most people would think it actually costs. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so this is me redacting me, right? So it got my name, it got my age, and it kind of, I haven't paid a dime at this point, just for the record. This is basically it's saying, is this the person you're looking for? And I'm the only one that actually popped up here as well. So it's basically like relationship diagram. It has a list of people that are related to me. In there is my mom. In there, if you click on my mom, it'll open up, it'll show you my mom and her maiden name. So I want you to start thinking of this in terms of if I was going to try to steal information from your bank account. For $5, I can get into your bank account. It's easy. So we have the relationship diagram. You can find my mom, can find my dad, my sister, my brother, my kids, my wife, all of them are there. The cities I've lived in, the counties I've lived in, the cell phone number that's currently associated with, the email addresses that I've been known to use, my date of birth, my age, which I went down at 45, my social security number. Now, you might be able to tell that there's very consistent numbers at the beginning of the social security number. By default, it doesn't display your entire social security number. It just displays the last 4 digits of your social security number. When it does this, it shows you those first 4 without charging you a dime. So if I want to break into your voicemail, if I can spoof your phone number, which is easy peasy pumpkin squeezy, and call your cell phone number from me spoofing your cell phone number, it will ask me for your PIN. A tremendous number of people use numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, or the last 4 digits of their social security number, or their date of birth, but it's very easy to guess those PIN numbers, and then you can gain access to people's voicemail as well. Once again, at this point, I haven't been charged a dime. This is all that you get for free when you have access to these particular services. This is what a comprehensive report can actually pull down. And by comprehensive, I mean it's really comprehensive. I can get your address summary. That means every single address that you have lived at, all of the details. I can even get pictures of the places that you've lived and other owners of that property. I can get the city's history, county's history, possible phone numbers, all of your email addresses, driver's license information, criminal background check investigation, Florida accidents, global watch list, professional affiliations, professional licenses, pilot licenses, voting registration, hunting permits, weapons permits, all my property. That includes my vehicles. It'll actually find make, model, year, and the loan number for those vehicles. If I've been evicted, if I have bankruptcy, past vehicle information, UCC filings, corporate affiliations, liens, judgments, aircraft, business affiliation, degree of relatives. I can say I want to go out 4 degrees of relatives. Summary of that, likely associates, people I've done business with, possible associates, neighbor phones. I can literally get the phone numbers of the people that live next to me, possible employers. And I've given you the table of contents, and the actual full record of me is probably somewhere in the vicinity of about 70 pages long. about all of these different things that they're able to pull on me. Now, when you're looking at this, I want you to look at this with a critical eye. This all isn't one master database that everybody feeds into. This is a data broker and a data aggregator. They collected and purchased this data in bulk from multiple places. I want you to look at this, and if you want to in Discord, type it in. What are all the places they would have to purchase data from to get all of this data? And what I mean by that, like addresses, they would have to get home loan information. That ties into city information. Email addresses, once again, getting information from people that are purchasing and delivering packages to individuals. Think about all the places that are selling your content, selling your data, and it becomes absolutely horrifying. As soon as you interact in a cyber way at all, immediately they've got data on you. All right, and I need to stop now. I was actually going through and actually showing the report and trying to redact it. And I was thinking of Todd Davis and how he's like, this is my social security number. It didn't work well for Todd Davis at all. All right, there you go.
So we have an anonymous attendee who asked a question I was actually curious about as well. Is there any vetting process before getting access to the TLO site?
Yes, they make sure that you actually have a physical address. You get a site visit to your physical address, and you have to have a sign on the front of your address that denotes that this is a business and this is what they do. That's it.
Well, I mean, that's hard to do.
When in the address, this is when the guy came out and actually validated our address. Oh, you have to have a locking file cabinet too. When he came out, he said that there was a huge problem on reservations in South Dakota where people were standing up shipping containers and trying to basically say that that was their place of business. And they were sketch people doing sketch things with this data. But that was pretty much all that they looked at from a vetting perspective.
Okay. Whoa, hey, whoa, come back. No, this is part 2. If you watched part 1, and maybe you haven't, you want to go back and watch part 1 because you missed a whole bunch of stuff. But in part 2, if you liked that, you definitely got to check out part 3. So if you're hearing my voice and saying, what is this guy saying? Check the links below. You just watched part 2 of the video. Now, guess what? There's a part 1 and a part 3. So go check those out at the links below. And by the way, if you're checking out more videos, why don't you like and subscribe? Because then you'll find out when we're putting up more new content as soon as it comes out. So check it out. Links below. Come on, watch more. It's good. Feed the algorithm. It's fine.